Corey Pronman on the Athletic Hockey Podcast released a massive injury update for Cayden Lindstrom, and we have scientific paper evidence to prove it's worse than we thought. Plus, Dave Pagnotta says that Kent Hughes is in conversations with multiple teams looking for a top 6 scoring winger. We have all that and more to get into on this episode of Habs Digest. Before we get into the first topic, if you're interested in the Cayden Lindstrom stuff, feel free to skip ahead. There will be a timestamp, but I think you'll actually find some of the other stuff here interesting. And to start, Jesse, I wanted to talk about something Frank Saravalli posted. Daily Faceoff, he kind of did his top 25 most likely trade candidates or top 25 trade candidates out there in the NHL right now, and he's had a couple of Habs names on the list. And, well, we're going to start with one, and it was David Savard. Now, he's kind of a guy, Jesse, that we know is probably going to get traded. He's a veteran presence on an expiring contract. I wanted to get your opinion on him, though, briefly, before we get into the other guy as well. Because David Savard, I mean, look at how many players have attributed a lot of their success to him, right? His ability to welcome players to the team, be that veteran presence. He's helped Xhekaj. He's helped even guys like Joshua Roy. Is that kind of thing so valuable that you wouldn't even risk trading him? Or do you think that the value you could get back for a defenseman of his stature and caliber might just be worth that risk?
This Habs team absolutely loves him. So for sure, that helps, increase his value quite a bit, right? Especially with a young D-man like Arber Xhekaj, somebody that we value so much. If you feel like he's going to have a positive effect on him, that you're going to help his numbers, early on in his career, right? That's a big reason to keep David Savard. We know a right-hand defenseman always has value, right? For the Habs, but we know for other teams as well, for that brand of hockey that he plays. I know it's going to intensify, like, as we're getting close to that trade deadline, for sure a competitor, but it's just the question, like, could this trade happen this offseason? We know how many D-men that we have, just so many. It's completely stacked. So I feel like he has a big value to the Montreal Canadiens. But I believe that if Kent Hughes does get a great deal for David Savard, that he is going to do it.
And I think we're going to be surprised by the return he gets simply because of some of those facts, Jesse. Like that kind of veteran leadership and the presence he brings to a locker room. I think a lot of teams would pay a lot to get that. And I think, we might be surprised. Remember the Sherratt trade, how much they got for him? Now, I would argue Savard maybe would be more impactful, but is what it is. I wanted to talk about another guy, too, that he had on the list just briefly because we got some more interesting stuff to get into. But Christian Dvorak, he has him at $4.45 million. Of course, we know that, but it's clear that he hasn't worked out for the Habs. Even when healthy, he hasn't been able to break through that ceiling. Montreal will be moving on from him. The only questions are when, now or later, and how, trade or free agency. My issue with Christian Dvorak, Jesse, is that I just don't see any team willing to give up much for him. Now, he's a fantastic face-off guy, and he has been really good friends with some guys. He's really good friends with Cole Caufield as well. So for a guy like him, I can actually see him sticking around for the full season just to let him go in free agency, because I feel like his presence and what he brings to the team when he's kind of on, when he can give you that face-off, but also, again, the locker room presence that seems to be very good. Unless the Habs get some kind of crazy offer for him, I actually think I see Dvorak maybe sticking around for the whole year.
It's a solid point because we know Kent Hughes does not like to lose a trade. He likes to get good value. He likes to trade players when they are worth their most. That being said, I believe with the emergence of Owen and Beck, and just with this Montreal Canadiens team wanting to be more competitive, I wonder if Kent Hughes wouldn't be tempted, even though he's not getting the best return, to really just help this team just, really be in the game night in, night out, right? Just because Christian Dvorak, we know that there's talent there. He's just never been able to break through that potential. And of course, the injuries haven't helped, right? But at a certain point, we want to be so much more competitive next year. So that really means all hands on deck, and you really need your third line, center there really playing, right? So I feel with our boy Owen Beck making the rise, I could see a trade for Christian Dvorak as early as this offseason.
You know what? If Owen Beck proves that he shows in training camp and stuff that he's that good, I'm actually on board with that. And now that I'm thinking about it, again, teams would pay for a great face-off guy as you head towards the playoffs. So who knows how much these guys will fetch. Let us know down below whether you think these guys will be traded, and if so, when? This offseason or maybe at the deadline. But we're going to move on to the next topic. And I wanted to talk about something Dave Pagnotta said. Dave Pagnotta has a lot of takes out there from the fourth period, but he said something very interesting recently about Kent Hughes and his plans for the Montreal Canadiens. Let's take a look here. So Dave Pagnotta said, following the trend of the last two drafts, he said Kent Hughes is currently engaged in conversation with some teams and kind of exploring to see what kind of NHL ready forwards top 6 guys are available. And it looks like he's circling on the wing. And he goes on to say that's why we've heard the names Marty Necas, Trevor Zegras, this kind of stuff, Jesse. It's maybe not the most breaking report, but it is interesting to get that feeling that, Pierre LeBrun's talked a bit about this. Now Dave Pagnotta kind of reinforcing that Hughes is calling around. Like, he is looking around to see what's available. I saw a piece on Cole Perfetti today saying he's probably going to stay in Winnipeg. So even that kind of little RFA thing is maybe out the window. But there's a lot of guys around the league, and I'm starting to think, Jesse, more and more that Kent might just pull a little surprise on him. Pick up a guy that we haven't heard about just because he's calling every team to see what they have to offer.
That's Kent Hughes' style, and I love to hear that we're expanding the search right now. You got to feel like Kent Hughes is really doing his homework on all the best young wingers, in the NHL here. Because really, Josh, I don't know about you, but I can't wait to see a season of Suzuki and Dach as our number 1 and 2 centers there kind of going forward. It's just kind of adding from there. To be honest, I'm not heartbroken. More so about, moving on from Zegras, not to slight, Necas too much at all there, but I just feel like, there is some great young talent out there. For sure, you need to pay, but the fact that they're looking for somebody that's NHL ready, that really has that quality, really signals to me that they're very serious about taking this rebuild to the next level. And I think, kind of slowly building, adding it is completely par for the course.
Yeah, it's going to be cool because, we can trade for someone now, or we can pick someone in the draft, right? If Demitov's available, and it's looking maybe like the Habs might not take Lindstrom. We'll talk about that in a second, but you could take Demitov. He could add some scoring in a year or two, and then all you need is really one more decent winger, and you have a very solid top 6. And we still don't really know, like you said, what a full season of Suzuki and Dach is going to look like, how good it's going to be down the middle, whether that could in the future look like a 1-2 top line combo centers for a championship team. We don't really know, but this season's going to tell us a lot. Whether the Habs trade for someone, they draft someone, we're going to learn a ton this year, and this is going to be step 1 into that stepping stone all the way up to a title contender. But Jesse, like we said, drafting people is the key to that stuff, and we have a huge update on Cayden Lindstrom. Now, this kind of just came out of nowhere today, but Corey Proman on the Athletic NHL show, he kind of just said this out of nowhere, and he just went on to say that we had some concerns about Cayden Lindstrom's health, including a hand injury and a herniated disc in his back. Now, if you guys have been following the Cayden Lindstrom saga, which we have quite closely, I don't remember ever hearing specifically it was a herniated disc in his back. I remember hearing some rumors a while ago that it was probably that. Unless I missed something, I don't believe this was confirmed. And if it was, please feel free to prove me wrong down below. I'd love to hear from you, but I hadn't heard this. So Jesse, naturally, we had to do a bit of digging to see what this could mean. And sure enough, we found a paper by Gaudiani et al., and I'm going to link this down below so you guys can go have a look at it as well. But it's about the return to play, performance, and earnings analysis after lumbar disc herniation in National Hockey League players. Now, disclaimer, lumbar disc is obviously your lower back. There are other disc herniations up in your upper back. And also disclaimer, we are not medical professionals. This is just off what we are researching, right? This has no bearing on fact necessarily, so please do your own research before you take what we say as gospel. With that said, I want to get into this, Jesse. So they did a study of NHL players who had lumbar disc herniation, which is by far the most common for NHL players. They said they have a high incidence of lumbar disc herniations, and the purpose to study it was to determine the impact on performance and financial earnings. And what were the conclusions? They said the majority of NHL players who sustained a lumbar disc herniation returned to play, 79%, but had shorter careers overall and decreased performance outcomes when prepared to match cohorts at both 1 and 3 seasons post-injury. So overall, Jesse, disc herniations, you guys can look this up as well. They are things that tend to come back. Not always. They can disappear and never come back. But especially if you're an athlete, you're doing a lot of lifting, you're doing a lot of moving around, they can come back. And the studies prove, Jesse, that it has some decent long-term effects on people. With that said, are you now maybe more concerned than you've ever been about Cayden Lindstrom at 5? Because I'm starting to really change my mind about it.
It's honestly, it's a little bit worrying to hear, but at the same time, it's like, we're seeing how a lot of people are still kind of picking Lindstrom over Demidov. And you have to feel like they're having this info, but honestly, it is a little bit worrying, right? Not only that the career is a little bit shorter, the production, but also that it takes sometimes to heal, right? It takes, at least a year to kind of a couple to really get back to that production there. That being said, is that, Cayden Lindstrom, even though he didn't do all the testing, obviously you have to feel like this was part of the reason. In the bench press, he did come in second. He was one of the best in the grips test as well. So, the proof's in the pudding there, the fact that he's still kind of performing well, right? But Obviously, we've seen this affect a lot of NHL players in a very bad way. Obviously Mario Lemieux comes to mind right away. Now, we're not saying it's all doom and gloom for this young man.
Of course.
Obviously, we know that sports science is better than it ever has. The athletic therapists that they have available, the different techniques and treatments that they can do to help with these sort of things is all next level. So you have to feel like this is really going to help the young man quite a bit here. But at the same time, like, obviously, we don't know where the injury is on the back, but depending on that, it is potentially a little bit scary.
Yeah, it's a weird update. Like, again, it's just something that felt like it came out of the blue. And I'm not saying it's like, oh, it's over for Cayden Lindstrom. I would never touch him. I still think he should be a top candidate. There's a reason he's at the top of the bookies list. There's a reason he's at the top of so many mock drafts. Scouts and executives have this medical information. Like, they all already know this. It's just that I don't think we necessarily knew this. So, and the fact that he's still so high up, I think tells us a lot, because he's young. A ton of sports science can help him out, Jesse. I just think that for Habs fans, when we're looking at this, our natural reaction is to say, well, why don't we just pick someone that is arguably as good, that the Habs probably also have high on their board, that doesn't have a risk of a recurring back injury? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just, I think, where our mind's at. But at the end of the day, I mean, I just got to trust Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon and assume they have this file. And if they pick him, then, hey, Montreal got this new medical staff. I think it still could be a great pick depending on what they find.
And this study also shows that it is something that happens quite a bit, with NHL players as well, and everything else, right? But there still obviously is the effects, with that as well. So at the same time, though, is we're having so many problems with injuries of late that it can be a little bit worrisome. But for me, it says hockey is a physical game. Like, it's going to happen. It's really part of it. You just want a player that obviously you feel can be consistent, can come in night and night out. But I feel like injuries, you really just got to take it as part of the game.
Yeah, that's a good point. Injuries are going to happen no matter what at some point for most players. And for bigger guys, it tends to be sometimes at a higher incidence. But let us know down below. Is this scaring you away from Lindstrom? Does this scare you at all? Anyone with herniated discs, let us know down below how it's affected you. Because, this is just it's a bit of an interesting one. But thank you all for watching, because that'll do it for this episode of Habs Digest. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We'd really appreciate it. I'm Josh Gosse, my co-host, Jesse Poirier. We'll catch you in the next one.